Welcome everyone to our IEP workshop. I'm getting ready to go live on Facebook and then we'll do our introduction, so hang on with us just for a second. All right. We're gonna make sure we have our links already. Share to our page. All right, we're getting ready to go live.
Hi.
It's all just connecting. Okay, redirecting us. Okay, we are live on Facebook. Hang on one second. I need to actually close down that screen so we're not double hearing me. And I'm actually going to double check our connection on Facebook just to make sure that I just didn't lock us out. And to everybody in Facebook, if you can see us yet, right now, let's see what we have going on. It looks like we are live. So let's go ahead and get started. And I will double check to make sure that our connection is going well here as we're going. My name is Whitcher. I have been working in the special education community for over 20 years. And I am so excited today to bring onto this workshop with me Courtney Burnett, who has really just stepped up as an IEP coach in her community. And I am so grateful to have her in the IEP Coach Network. So as you guys know, I have a brother with Down syndrome. He inspired me to be a special education teacher. I taught for a few years, but I was teaching by day and I was coaching and consulting at night, working with parents in schools and creating IEPs that work and finding those solutions that maybe aren't so kind of out in the forefront of what we need to do to prepare all children for the future. So Courtney, I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are and why you are doing what you're doing.
Well, I think why I'm doing what I'm doing all comes back to my daughter, Hannah. She was born with cerebral palsy, and through our special needs journey, I just realized that there was a shortage of therapists in the country, really, but in my community as well. And so that's why I started working as a speech therapist and then as an advocate to reach the needs of my community, realizing other parents were struggling with the education system as well.
And you're based out of Arizona.
Yes.
So you're able to attend meetings with parents and meet with parents and do all those great things in Arizona. And then you're also set up online. So you're going to be able to have a further outreach outside of Arizona, which is one of the things that I love to do too. I love to work with families across the country. And it's just something that you guys need to know, that you're not alone, that no matter where you're located at, we're all kind of dealing with the same struggles in special education. So we're going to talk about some of the different hot topics in special education. If you registered for this workshop, then you got the download link. If you did not register for this workshop, I will be putting the link in the comments and you will be able to get a copy of all of the handouts, of the slides, and you'll have all the information on how you can reach Courtney and I after this workshop. So let's dig in. This is a foundational piece, right, Courtney? I mean, this is where things start to change. So I love to ask parents, teachers, therapists, what's the purpose of an IEP? And many times I get answers like, well, an IEP is to hold a teacher accountable for teaching my child, or to make sure my child receives therapies, or to figure out what my child needs to learn and how to teach them. And that's true. I mean, a lot of those points there happen within the IEP process, but I want to make sure that we're all working from the same foundation. And I can't wait for Courtney to kind of share with you how this changed her way of advocating for her daughter. So this is a huge amount of information. And this is kind of how we feel, right? When you're looking at an IEP law book or you're Googling and you're finding the websites and you're just like, oh my gosh, there's so much information. But I want to break this piece down for everybody who is watching with us. And then Courtney, I'm going to have you kind of fill in how this changed your perspective. There's this one section right here, actually, and I'm going to actually highlight it a little bit on our screen. There is this section here. So we're going to look at just this paragraph. And it says that the purpose of IDEA is to ensure that all children have a free and appropriate public education. And we know that, we hear that. And that's that word appropriate that kind of drives everybody crazy. Teachers, administrators, parents, doctors, therapists, everybody interprets appropriate differently. So I like to continue to look at the purpose of the IEP is to meet the child's unique needs. And here's my favorite part. And it's to prepare them for further education, for employment, and for independent living. So if we really look at the IEP as the entire purpose of us sitting down at this table once a year, sometimes more, it's really to come up with a plan where we're preparing a child for further education, employment, and independent living. Now, Courtney, share with us when you started to, kind of learn this foundation and what the big picture was for the IEP. How did that change things for you?
Well, it changed from just looking at it as something that happened at school and only in the classroom to looking at what does Hannah need, my daughter need inside the classroom as well as at home, and how can we prepare her for those opportunities outside the classroom to be successful as well. And so that concept actually took me a while to understand that I could have a voice in that and suggesting things that might help us at home as well, not just looking at as her deficits and what she needed to do only at school to try to catch up versus real life.
And that's a key piece. That's what I want everybody who is watching this workshop and is ready to dig into their child's education to really think of it as, this is not something where we're looking, how do we make school better? IEP is not about making school better. How do we help them learn more of what's in the book? That's not what the purpose of an IEP is. So one of the ways that we need to really start that conversation is to look at the difference between old school and new school thinking. And this is where the breakdown happens. I told you guys I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I try to make this process as simple as possible. To do that, we have to get on the same page. And, there's this statement that, the research is clear. There's actual research that nothing is going to motivate a child more than when learning is valued by schools and families. Like, we all know that the child is impacted when school and home are not connected. When school and home are not on the same page, that negativity falls through the entire family. I'm sure, Courtney, you've experienced that, where that stress level, right? The stress level between home and school and things, does it trickle into your house?
Absolutely.
So if we can make the communication clear between home and school and get on the same page, then we can relieve some of that stress and start moving forward in the IEP process. One of the ways that we do that is to kind of show both sides of the story and then figure out, how do we make this communication happen? So remember, I was trained as a teacher, guys. So, I have a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree, I got 5 teaching certificates, and every one of those different certificates, different trainings taught me how to find all the deficits for a child. It was, let's find everything that is below par. Where as a special needs sibling and growing up in a special needs house, my mom was always saying, but he can do that. Talking about my brother. He can do this. He can do that. How come we're not working on these things that he is good at and making them better? Courtney, did you experience that same thing with Hannah?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times the testing they use is to only highlight the deficits as well. So I would leave feeling completely defeated that it didn't catch the full vision of who Hannah is as a person and her abilities and all the progress she has made. And so definitely looking at it, there was kind of this gap between what the school was wanting and what I was wanting for her IEP because we were looking at it from two different points of view.
Absolutely. And that's just, it's something, this is the concept that when a parent comes to me and says, I'm not heard and nobody understands my child, what I'm really hearing is nobody gets what my child really can do. They're not seeing the potential and they're really focused on the deficit based. So to bring that together, that's something that we need to recognize that is part of the school team's job. It's to look at the negative side of what's not being achieved, but they also should be recognizing your child's strengths and what they can do and building on those things. Courtney, do you have an example? I know that we've talked before about like Hannah's AAC device and different things. You know, what is something that, let's just say in the last 6 to 12 months that has happened where Hannah's been able to show her ability in a way that maybe wasn't seen before?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the two things we've done different was making sure that because Hannah's in a self-contained classroom, that she had opportunities to go out with her device on campus and be around her peers. And in doing so, Hannah's been able to go to PE and participate and make choices on what she wanted to do. She's also been able to make improvements using her device. And just recently, she's been able to indicate that she wanted to go to bed. Now, that's just something that she hasn't been able to communicate. We were always interpreting her movements, her gestures or whatever. And just recently, she was able to do a 3-hit push to say, I want to go to bed. I want my bed. And so that's been really exciting. And I attribute that. Yeah.
I love that. And that's exactly what we're talking about, right? Of the further education, employment, independent living. And we're talking about, you know, using the school team and the school resources to enhance her skills that trickle all the way over to home where she's saying, I want bed. And she's, so it's pulling that team together. So it truly does help you at home. That's one of the things that of course I hear all the time too. I don't have any help at home. And I can't change those resources of what's available in your area, but what we can do and what you can do as an IEP coach, Courtney, for your clients, I know, is we can bring that team together at school as much as possible to give those skills that your child needs. So give support and help that learning happen so home does become easier. Home becomes more accessible. For that. So that goes to skill focus and skill usability. This is a huge one. So all IEP coaches, consultants, trainers, we all kind of have our things that drive us crazy. You know, we all have those certain pieces that just kind of get under our skin and we're like, if I could change one thing. And I will tell you that for me, and I think it's because I'm trained as a teacher, I focus a lot on the IEP goals of, do they make sense? I don't want any IEP goal written that doesn't make sense, that's not truly going to impact a child's future. So do you ever go to school and you were thinking like, why am I learning this? I'm never going to use it. And you were right. You never used it. Those are the goals that we don't want in the IEP. And a lot of times because teams are in the habit of writing goals that are, step 1, step 2, step 3, like to learn money, you have to learn how to count coins first. I don't know who made up that rule back in the 19 whatevers that you have to learn how to count coins to do money. But I can tell you, I don't have to count coins. If I never touched a penny, nickel, dime, or quarter again, I could still be a functioning independent adult. So I don't want to take up that precious IEP space with goals that don't make sense. Now, I'm not saying that nobody should, like nobody should learn how to count coins. No, if a child learns how to count coins, that's great, but it's not one of those further education, employment, independent living skills that's going to make or break a child's future. We don't need to spend 3 years in elementary school doing that. So kind of weeding out the goals of what's important and what's not important, that's a key piece for me. Have you been able to work, Courtney, kind of on Hannah's IEP in the last year? Have you been able to help the team kind of refocus on what she needs most?
Yeah, and really looking at how can we make these goals meet what the school district needs for their objectives and matching with the different things that they're looking for, and how can we make that meaningful for Hannah and for home, and how can we all work together for doing that. So one of the things her teacher did was she's been introducing words to her to recognize them on her device. So her teacher makes me a copy. We're doing that during our natural story time at home with the other kids and integrating that, making the PT goals functional both for school and home, getting in and out of the restroom. That's a huge obstacle for us with her having cerebral palsy. So just those types of things that, yes, we need to meet these objectives that the school's looking for, but we also need to have the buy-in from her, my daughter. If she doesn't find it meaningful, especially with her cognitive ability, she's absolutely not going to do it. It has to be motivating for her. But who wants to sit there and do work that's not meaningful?
That is a great point. That is a great point. So when we're talking about skill focus and skill usability, that absolutely includes that the child has to be connected to the learning. If your child is disconnected from what's being pushed on them through the IEP, if it doesn't have true meaning to them, that doesn't mean that we get to sit around and do what we want all day. Of course, we all have to learn to do things that we don't want to do, but there's got to be a connection at some level for that to be mastered and then generalized. So let's talk about this one, pull-out therapy versus integrated therapy. I know Hannah's had a ton of therapy. You're a speech therapy assistant. Kind of my take on this is, there's a lot of kind of all or nothing when we are sitting at an IEP table, right? Like, we only do pull-out therapy. Or if you want group, you have to be pulled out. We don't have push-in abilities to do that. And it's important for all parents to know, and for teachers too, for teachers and therapists and admins and school teams. I used to be a teacher and I was coaching at the same time, which means I'm all about never throwing a staff member under the bus. This is about how the system is working. And we get in our own habits when we're hired by a school district. You get in your own habits of what is allowed and not allowed. And with this therapy topic, it's just important for everybody to know that there is no right or wrong and there is no all or nothing. I'm sure in your experience, Courtney, you've had to make some changes on how Hannah's gotten her therapy, as she's growing, as her skills change.
Right, absolutely. I mean, there's a time where she needed individual therapy away from everybody out, and because she was so highly distracted and she wouldn't focus on learning her device and whatnot. But now as she's gotten older and more comfortable with it, definitely being able to be in a social environment actually motivates her more. Being able to not just use those physical therapy skills in the classroom, but be able to go out onto the playground in our community as well as at school, and really finding that carryover. And in fact, I've seen the most progress she's ever made when we've started doing that both at home and at school, not just doing it in the therapy office or in-home therapy that we do have here in Arizona, but taking it outside the house and showing her she can use those skills at the park. She can use those skills to get in and out of the car. That's huge.
It's so huge, because if you're only going to learn a skill in one way, in one setting, it's not really going to prepare you for the future. Like we talked about, that's the entire purpose of the IEP, right? So goals in isolation versus goals in naturally occurring routines. It's so important. When I'm looking at an IEP, with a client, or I'm teaching inside the IEP Help Center, or if I'm training IEP coaches, I'm looking at how are we going to use these goals and practice those goals, in the real world. I know as a teacher, and I still make this suggestion to parents and to teachers, sometimes we have to kind of like sabotage in routine to make kids work in that naturally recurring routine. So like if I had a kiddo that was in my classroom that was learning how to tie their shoes, well, they could tie it when they were sitting in the OT office with no distractions, with prompts, with those things. But if their shoe was untied and they were walking through the school building, they didn't stop to tie their shoe, and it was a very kind of flustered situation. So we have to know how to tie our shoes in all different situations. So we would kind of have at least once or twice a week where, oops, I may have made sure that his shoe got untied in the classroom. So we could kind of, oh, look, your shoe's untied, and we need to practice that skill. So naturally occurring routines, I think, is so important. I know that you have a great story, and just kind of, it's so important for all of our families that have children that are being educated in self-contained classrooms, in that special day class. It's called different things across the country.
Right.
Remember, I work across the country, so we have different acronyms for everything. But bottom line is, if you're getting majority of your instruction in a special education classroom, that does not mean that you don't have inclusive experiences, that you don't practice your skills outside of that classroom. You don't need permission to be part of the school body. We should be working towards that. So when Hannah is working on her goals, let's say in speech with her AAC device, share some of the examples, like the playground, that you were encouraging the team that she needs a naturally occurring routine.
Yeah, absolutely. She was making great progress inside of her classroom, but I noticed that she didn't have a lot of opportunities to go out into the general ed setting and be around her peers. And it was really important to me, even though Hannah's nonverbal in the traditional sense, that she had experiences with her peers, that they were able to get to know her, that they knew her name on campus, that they knew who she was, and that they knew that she was a person that they could talk to. And so I talked to her teacher about finding opportunities with the 7th and 8th graders to go out and be a part of the 7th, 8th grade team, and that the kids had an opportunity to feel comfortable coming up and talking with her, that they knew that she could answer with her device, that she could join them in PE, that they could have lunch together. And so now she was eating in a classroom a year and a half ago, but now she goes out into the setting. And I think it's really important. Her teacher said, I didn't take her out there because I didn't want you to feel uncomfortable with because Hannah has struggles to get her spoon to her mouth because of her CP. She does eat in a different way. And her teacher was afraid that Hannah would be embarrassed, or I would be embarrassed if the other kids saw her struggling to eat. And I was thinking totally different. I was thinking, let the kids experience that. Let them know that some people eat this way. Some people have trouble. This is how they learn. That it's okay, that differences don't make us less, they make us better. And so her teacher was doing what she thought was best. And when I brought it up, she's like, oh, absolutely do that. I had no idea that you would want that for her. And then she totally changed her schedule, allowed her to go out there. She's going out there for PE, for lunchtime, and some other settings. And the other kids are coming into the self-contained classroom and leading science projects and different things and modifying them for the kids. And so now they even started volunteering on a Special Olympics, which really made me happy, because
that's one of my favorite memories. And it still is, I talk about that as a special needs sibling. I mean, I was a Special Olympics coach. We'd go away for 3 days, and I was in charge of the boys because I had a brother. So I had to take care of the boys. That's such a great experience. That's such a great peer experience. Sports can be such a great connection. In school and Special Olympics and those things. But what I think is really important here is, that this next bullet point is, goals determined by professionals versus goals determined by family input. And it's almost like you had to give permission to the teacher to break that boundary, right? To break that boundary of what, she thought would be right, or what maybe has been done in the past. And, when I'm coaching parents, I say this often, you have to give the school permission to fail sometimes, right? Like it's okay if you want to try something new, let me know. If it doesn't work, I promise I'm not going to get mad at you and write 15 advocacy letters, because if we want to try something new, let's go ahead and try that. Or if you want to try something different that's never been tried at the school before, or, there's just different things that parents actually have to give permission. Now, a little bit of a teacher perspective from that. I can tell you that if I was still a teacher today, I would definitely have some barriers up and be very careful about some of the decisions that I made, because I would have the experience of maybe doing that in the past and a parent getting mad at me, right? Like, oh, I was doing what was best and a parent got mad at me, and then I got in trouble from my boss of like, why, just do what the parent says kind of thing. And then I'm not going to take that leap and push that boundary again, right? So as a parent, if you want something different, if you want to have that input, you have to share your vision of what is appropriate, there's that word again, of what is appropriate for your child. So for your comfort level, Courtney, and what you expect for your family, it is very appropriate for Hannah to get used to eating with different kids in kind of a hustle and bustle environment. You know, and if people are going to look at her, so be it. That's them looking at her. I know that you travel with your family, right? So you're in different environments where she's not going to be eating in the same place and doing that. So, so just share a little bit about your experience in the last, 6 to 8 months and that concept of a parent input statement and being clear on that kind of vision of what's happening. How does that change things when you start coming from that point of view and giving teachers permission?
Well, I think it changed it from we're just making this IEP for school only in this environment and not looking at this as a long-term goal and building off of her skills from previous years to building the goals from her skill set that she's already mastered and then changing them and tweaking them. Also being able to feel comfortable with talking with the team. And prior to probably 3 years ago, this never happened. I would show up at the IEP meeting, it'd be a complete surprise, the goals, what was going on, what we were doing. I had no idea. And then I felt paralyzed because I didn't have time to process it and think about it. Whereas now I have conversations with them in email leading up to it, talking about how we want to change the goals, what's worked, what doesn't, and really having that team approach to her goals and being willing to have my thoughts on what I want, but also be willing to listen with open ears to what the school has and some of the things that I hadn't even thought about when her teacher shared with me some of her perspective, and being able to find that common ground to really make it work for what she needs and what I need and meet in the middle for what's best for my daughter. So it's really changed the goals from just being singular year to year to how can we build off this for her future and really carry that over into all environments. And that's where I've seen her flourish. I mean, she's done stuff. I almost can't talk about it because I'll start crying. She's done stuff
I'm
that
sure all the parents working would pull out their Kleenex with you. So
because it's just, going from a vision you had for your child when they're born to realizing that's going to be a different vision from what you thought motherhood was going to look like, it can be very difficult. And so I've had to learn to find those new joys, and even though she's not on a traditional track, that she is making progress, and with the team's help, because I can't do it all at home and they can't do it all at school. That's where I've seen her flourish, is when we're in good communication, having a good relationship, really looking at Hannah's future and not just this school year or this.
And I want to give you some praise here that I don't even know if you would give yourself. So let me just share with everyone. It's not all sunshine and rainbows for you when it comes to advocating for Hannah, whether it's outside of school. You're just like every parent who's watching here, you're on the phone with insurance companies, you're fighting those battles, you're doing those things. And even in school, you're not going to have every team member go, oh, look, Courtney learned how to communicate with us. Let's all be great. Let's all just, make everything happen. My praise to you is that you have been steady in your journey. There are ups, there are downs, there are people that are going to put up roadblocks, but that's one of my keys. With the online IEP Help Center, where I'm coaching parents every month, because we want to stay out of crisis, right? We don't want those huge ups and downs. So, or when I'm training an IEP coach, why am I creating more IEP coaches? Because I don't want people out there having to fight the big battles. I want them to be able to have a coach walk them through those steady steps every year of what needs to get done so I can live my life. And I think something that I've seen happen, so you have been steady, you have been, secure. Maybe you don't feel secure all the time in what you're asking for and what you're doing, but you are putting forth the actions of being steady and secure, which makes you a leader in your community. And that is a huge piece that everybody needs to know that it's not even for everybody who knows everything about what's going on in special ed, that doesn't mean that it's always easy. It means that we stay steady because we're clear on what we're asking for and what's going on. So I just kind of want to give you a virtual high five for that one, for being so steady and having that leadership. And I'm so excited to see what's going to happen in your community as you help more parents with that. So I'm going to encourage everybody right now to, I'm going to check Facebook. So as you guys see me looking down, I promise I'm not, watching the latest, cat video on Facebook and that. I'm actually going to be looking for questions as we go over some of the hot topics. And one of those hot topics, just to kind of get our Q&A started, is a lot of times I hear we can't do a certain goal, or we can't take out something or add in something because Common Core or our state standards say we have to have that. And I want everybody to know that your child's IEP is ultimately what rules your child's education. So if something needs to be in your child's IEP to prepare them for the future, that's important. If something needs to be taken out, so maybe as I check some of these Facebook questions, Courtney, you can kind of share that story. I know that you had told me about somebody that you had to actually get something taken out of an IEP.
Right. So the particular school curriculum had a certain kind of reading program that they like to use, and that's what they promoted on their website as teaching. But after 2 years of this child trying that system, it really didn't work for her. She was not making progress. So we were able to advocate for that to be removed from the IEP because it wasn't helping her. It wasn't helping her learn to read. It wasn't helping her further her education in any way. It was actually causing the opposite: stress and anxiety and feeling failure from always having an F in this particular category. So we were able to customize. She still is going to be doing a reading program right alongside her classmates, but it's just going to be customized for her to meet her needs. And so it was a huge win for the family because they felt this burden of nightly struggle taken away, and now they can focus on something that is going to be meaningful for their child and really help them get those reading and writing skills that they want for her, but it just wasn't happening through this particular program.
And I think it's so important for parents to know that you can change things in the middle of the school year. You can change things anytime that they need to be changed. It's not kind of a one and done kind of meeting. This is an ongoing process. And sometimes what we think is going to work doesn't work. So changing your mind is okay. I have parents all the time that say, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I want them to do something different, but I'm the one who advocated for it to go this way. I asked them to do this. I thought it would work. It's not working. And I'm like, well, would you be upset if a teacher came to you and said, hey, I thought this would work, but it's not working. So can we change it? And she says, no, I'd be grateful, because then my child wouldn't have to struggle that way. And I'm glad the teacher recognized that. And I said, well, the teachers will feel the same way if you as a parent recognize something's not working.
Absolutely. No one wants to continue going down the same path if it's not working. I think that comes back to building those relationships where the parent and the teacher and the team feel safe saying, hey, we really tried this. Here's what's working about it. Here's what's not. We'd like to tweak this. What are your thoughts about that? And having that conversation and having that good enough relationship that we can do that all with the focus of what's best for this child. How can we help this child learn and be successful? And when that's our focus, we take that away from us versus them, and it creates that circle of trust, so to speak, where we're all working towards a common goal of helping them have the best education possible.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, so another kind of hot topic when it comes to Common Core or state standards are kind of like, what are all the other kids doing, right? There's a big question of like, what is everybody else doing? I want everybody to fully understand that these state standards or federal guidelines that are guiding our gen ed classrooms, right? These expectations that are happening, it truly is affecting the way that our teachers are teaching, which this, I have this bullet point in here because I do a lot of inclusion consulting, and I do a lot of working on making a child's schedule work, just how you worked on Hannah's schedule to say, okay, well, this is where she needs her education when it comes to some direct instruction academics, but she's getting other parts of her education on the playground and in the lunchroom, and that's what's appropriate for her. I was working with a client yesterday who just was struggling with the concept that in 5th grade, we just can't make the 5th grade curriculum magically turn into, 2nd grade reading level. Like we can't, like we just can't always make that exact bridge happen. That doesn't mean that there's not a solution. It just means that there are certain state standards that teacher literally has to go through to keep her job. We cannot change that piece of it. And that does trickle down and affect our abilities for inclusion in some areas. However, there are always workarounds. That's why, I will hop on a plane. I did that a couple of months ago, hopped on a plane and did a day trip in Kentucky and went down just to work through schedules of kids and say, okay, so traditional kind of inclusion process, it's not going to work because of what has to happen at that middle school, junior high, high school level, and what teachers have to do. But there are solutions. There are always going to be solutions. They just might be different than what you thought they were going to be.
Absolutely. And Catherine, I just wanted to touch on this. I think it's also important, like what the work you are doing and the work we do isn't not just for one client or one kid. When we help open up the way the thinking happens, thinking outside the box, a solution, the next kid that comes along that might have a similar issue, they can reflect on that and go, you know what, we really thought outside the box on this case over here, and it really turned out well for them. And I think that's a passion that just drives me, is it's just not my daughter or this one client. It's about helping educate and create a more open-mindedness to how we approach the education and just inclusion overall of our special needs in the society as a whole. And that's going to happen by making the change one child at a time. But I think that bigger vision is what drives, I could say it's what drives me, and I think it's what drives you too, is just because if you can change the mind of one administrator or one teacher, that's going to change the
lives. It's a ripple effect. It's like, and I tell parents all the time, in fact, I'm going to take this down here just for a second so I tell parents all the time that you don't have to save the world, and you don't have to go lobby on this, steps of Capitol Hill. I mean, we need people to lobby, and we need people who want to take that amount of energy and put it in that direction. I get asked all the time, why am I not out doing those type of things? Because I have a loud voice, right? And it's because I see the most change in the trenches. I don't need the special education law to change a child's education. So, all right, I'm going to get on a soapbox here just for a second. You got me started, Courtney.
I know, I did it.
Push that button. You know how to do that. Just because something is legally required doesn't mean that somebody's going to do it, right? So we could change the law and we could make something legally required. Now, here's my statement that I have said forever. I think I'm going to have to get it on a t-shirt and start putting it everywhere out there, is it's time to take special education out of what is legally required and become inspired, right? Because our kids and what they can do, that's what should be changing. That's what should be changing the minds and the hearts. Just because somebody has to do something according to the law doesn't mean they're going to do their best, doesn't mean that they're going to implement something for your child. When you have to do something versus you want to do something, and every strategy that I teach a parent, every strategy that I teach a new IEP coach, I coach you in the way that I do because I want you to know that what you're asking for is based in the law. That no questions asked. You're not asking for something that is unreasonable. You're not asking for something that's inappropriate. You're not asking for anything beyond what they can do, but you're taking an approach that makes them want to do it. And that's what a real coach or leader or a parent who is successful in having their voice heard, it's because you turn those tides one statement at a time in getting the team to want to do. Like that team wants Hannah communicating with children on the playground. Now, the law says, for the most part, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm just going to summarize here for the point of this story here. The law says Hannah can be, let's go put her wheelchair in the middle of the playground and sit there and she's she's at recess. Nowhere in the law does it say that she has to communicate with her peers. It just says she's at recess. And you had to create that environment that made them want to have Hannah have a different experience on the playground. True?
Right. Absolutely. In fact, we ended up getting a therapy swing at her elementary school, which they didn't have a swing that was accessible for her. Really didn't have anything that was accessible for her at recess. So I just had to talk with them and be like, hey, she's out there, but would you want to sit on the sidelines and watch everyone else play? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, I don't expect you to go build a new playground, but how can we make this a better experience with her peers? And so they ended up getting a 3-point harness swing so she could swing. And then they had a bucket that they would bring outside, and then encouraging again her peers to come and play with her and creating opportunities for them to cheer her on. We ended up bringing her gait trainer outside, which is kind of like a walker, but it has a space for her to sit if she gets tired, and exposing those kids to different equipment that they might see out in their community. And then they say, oh, that's cool. That's a gait trainer. Hannah used that. She walked with that. Creating that ability to be more comfortable with seeing kids out in the community using different types of things. I get questions all the time from kids, and sometimes parents are embarrassed, and I'm like, let them ask the questions. I want them to ask the questions so as a child, so as an adult, they know what the different things are and how to be a kind person to everybody. And that's how they're going to do it, by asking questions and feeling safe to ask a question and seeing how they can be a friend to her. You know?
Yeah. And and here's kind of the other side of things too. My brother went to a therapeutic day school, and people say, oh my gosh, then he had no inclusion. Well, that's not true at all. I mean, like you said, there's some peers that are coming into Hannah's classroom to help participate in some activities. He had that experience of, peers coming in. So high school peers came into his school. So he had that type of inclusion experiences. He went out into the community a lot. And inclusion does not mean that I am a person with special needs who is now socializing with somebody with non-special needs, right? That's not inclusion. Inclusion is being included in an experience. It is very, very possible for a child with special needs who's in a special day class to be excluded within that class, right? So if there's 5 kids in a class and the activity is appealing to 4 and the 5th one just feels left out, that's being excluded from that activity. So inclusion, I want to make sure that everybody understands that my version of inclusion when I'm, teaching teachers and I'm doing what they call professional development sessions, and I'm doing that, I'm broadening that scope of inclusion of it being an inclusive experience. I feel included in. So for everybody who has their kiddos are in special day schools, or they're not, getting out to lunch or recess or music or gym or reading centers, and they're not doing those things, that doesn't mean that your child can't have inclusive experiences. And that's actually something that's a whole nother webinar that we could do, right? On how to create inclusive experiences throughout the school, no matter what type of school, no matter what type of disability, no matter who's surrounding you, there are opportunities for a child to feel part of the school community. But we'll leave that one for another time. I do have a question from Nancy, who says, is unique learning with symbol sticks the same as a reading program? Now, Courtney, I don't know if you're familiar with unique learning system. That's something that I'm familiar with just because it's an online curriculum for the most part, right? That school districts buy into this unique learning system. It's then given to all the classrooms, and it kind of drives a lot of the programs. So in unique learning system, I believe their reading program is called Reading A to Z, is a piece of that. And there's these different things. So is it considered the same as a reading program? It could be, depending on how it's used. So, and that goes for all kind of curriculum. It's just because they say, oh, your child's working in Edmark, are they working in Edmark reading system because they get one worksheet a week from that curriculum, or are they working in it because that's what their direct instruction is? Courtney, have you been able to work with your team and just kind of, you don't have to share which curriculum or what's going on, but are you kind of tapped into, what she's doing? I know that's something that you encourage your clients to do, right? Is kind of tap into what resources are being used.
Yeah. And for her, I think, I don't know if it's easier or harder, but I think her teacher kind of has to create each of the kind of curriculum tracks for the kids because they are not necessarily all on the same level in there. So she's definitely, I mean, Hannah is in 8th grade, but is doing more like kindergarten reading type books and just making it meaningful for her. So she's not necessarily following one program. I think whenever I get questions like that, I always come back to that might be what they're using, but how is it being utilized to your child's full potential? Is there some tweaks that we need to make, some other curriculum we need to bring in to fill in the gaps if that's not working for your particular
or
child?
Data, right? Where's the data, right?
Yeah.
Show me the data that shows me that the program's working. I'm not going to knock any program holistically, meaning I'm never going to say this program is bad, which is kind of like, I just want to, Ashley asked, what are the benefits of a STEM program? She thinks that it may not be beneficial for her children who are on an IEP. Well, so STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, that's what it is. So a STEM program, again, I'm not going to say that a STEM program is good or bad. So when I am working in different schools, so if I have a school in Illinois calls me out and I'm working kind of in the trenches is what I call it. So I'm in the trenches and I'm following a couple of kiddos around for their schedules and I'm seeing what they have access to. There are teachers that execute a STEM program in a very, this is the lesson and this is what STEM looks like, right? This is our activity. This is our STEM lab for today, whatever that is. Then there are teachers that they're doing STEM, but if you don't know what STEM is, you wouldn't even know that that's what it is. Like they're so engaging in the way that it's a multi-level activity. And I think that's, that's what we're looking for Hannah, right? We're looking for these activities throughout her school day that are multi-level that she can do in her own way. With that. So STEM can actually create some great opportunities. So I don't want anybody to think that STEM overall, like, oh, my child, that's good for my child, that's not great for my child. But it's definitely something that needs to be, you have to look at how it's being executed.
And ask really great questions too, because sometimes we might be looking at it from one perspective or from the outside, at least what maybe is coming home doesn't seem like it's working or it doesn't seem like they're the one doing the work. I've had that happen. I'm like, there's no way Hannah did this. She did not cut this out. She did not do this. So how is this being used? So asking questions like, how is this being used in the classroom? How is this connecting? Is it helping fill a gap that you see at home? And by asking those questions, it gives the team the opportunity to maybe share their perspective on why they're using that curriculum and making sure it's not just because it's what the district decided is the curriculum, but how can we make that meaningful for that child and asking the right questions to the team.
Exactly. So, and that kind of leads to the whole data thing is something working or isn't something working? And so I work in, the world of translating data a lot. I know you do too, as a speech therapy assistant, as an IEP coach, as a mom, right? It's like you've got all these numbers and, different trials and what's being mastered and what's not being mastered. So I just want to make sure that we touch on this one piece of feelings are not data. Like that's a big kind of turning point for a lot of parents when they're learning how to have that clear voice. And a lot of times we'll hear at an IEP table, we feel your child is not participating. We feel your child is not getting the information. We feel your child is off task. Usually it's we feel your child is not ready for inclusion yet. And that we feel is a buffer. That's them trying to communicate without setting off a parent. And and I sit on all sides of the IEP table when I'm working, so I can respect that what they're trying to do. But to me, that's an opening, and I don't want to say a red flag, just more of an opening saying, you feel this way. Where's the data to support that, right? So where's the data to support that we're moving forward in that? And that's a really tough area for some parents to be able to say, like, okay, I understand you feel that way, but where's the data? Like, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying, where's the data? So how often do you expect to get data for Hannah? How does the data work for her?
Well, definitely no less than at least the quarterly progress reports that come home from her team. But again, I'll send questions and back to the data thing. So on the quarterly report, when I was looking over her progress, it looked like she was making some regression, which I was like, oh my gosh, why are we sliding backwards? So I had to take a deep breath and send an email saying, hey, I'm confused at the numbers here on the report because it looks like she's lost skills over the school year. What had happened was it wasn't clearly communicated on the progress note that I didn't quite understand this, but I guess in 7th and 8th grade, they start each quarter, they also increase the type of cueing or rigor of the goals, trying to set benchmarks for them to meet each quarter to hopefully reach the goal by the end of the IEP year. Well, that wasn't communicated. So even though it looked like she regressed, she was actually getting less cueing, some different things. So we were able to talk about that at her IEP meeting and better communicate prior to the quarterly progress note or on there a little bit more detailed notes so I could better understand, well, how is she being cued? How are we getting to that number and understanding that? So
that is a huge point. In fact, I went Facebook Live a couple of maybe about last week or so, because there's this trend kind of in the therapy world. And by therapy world, I mean like not school therapy. So we're going to talk about that next, a little bit difference between medical and educational. So like the clinical versus the educational version of therapies. They were saying, don't put prompts in the IEP because prompts are what adults should be doing, not what the child should be doing. And the IEP is all about the child, and we want the child to be independent. That's not a reasonable way to write a goal when we have a child that is heavily prompt dependent that we are trying to get to be independent. But if we don't document what those prompts are and what's being done, and that happens all the time. And here's the way that it looks. Let me break this down for everybody. This is how it looks in your world. You're saying, the school says my child can do this and I don't see it. Or it's the opposite way. My child can do this and the school doesn't see it. That's the conversation that's happening. Remember I said I work like a translator in between kind of like home and school and what's going on. So when somebody says to me, my child can do this and they can't do it at school, or the school says they could do this and there's no way that my child can do this, the first place that I'm going to look at is, what are the prompts? What environment are they in? How are they making this happen to get to that number, right? What are all the things that are lining up to get to that number? And then how do we get kind of everybody working on the same page so we can get to the most independent execution as possible? But we have to talk about prompts. You have to.
Yeah, and you want it to be consistent. How confusing would it be if at school you get 2 cues, 2 verbal cues, or a picture aid in answering questions, and then at home with either your ABA or habilitation or whatever your community offers, all of a sudden the child's not allowed to have any cues, and then they're getting frustrated, and that's why you're seeing such a different result from home or school. It's
such a huge piece. Okay, so I have a question here. For somebody, let me see. Son has an intellectual disability. This is from Margarita. She says, but otherwise seems typical. So she thinks that the teachers feel that her son doesn't want to learn or doesn't want to take the kind of accountability. And it's frustrating because they're so hands-on with him and they're pushing and pushing, and it sounds like to me, they're kind of blaming the kiddo. Right? Of like, you just don't want to do your work. You could do this if you just tried harder when it comes to that. And that happens a lot. And there's probably a mix. That's probably a meet in the middle where maybe he's too prompt dependent, right? So it's kind of like, I'll just sit here and wait because I know eventually somebody's going to help me do this. So maybe he's not taking all the accountability. But in situations like this is one of those times where I say, we need to get at least the teacher and somebody else in the room and the parent in the room and kind of get on board on what a present level of performance is, right? It's so important to really figure out where is the child so everybody can understand that it's not a choice for this child not to be learning, that there really is a present level. So important. Right?
Yeah. I've had that happen before too. They're like, she's purposely not doing this. And I was like, no, she can't she can't purposely not do it. I think it comes back to finding activities and kind of, here's the goal, here's what we want them to do, but is there different manipulatives we can bring in? Is there a different way to approach it that would also bring a little bit more motivation in too? Because maybe it's just that they've done drill work and he's just like, I can't do this activity the same way one more time. Bringing in those outside environments, how can we take that into all areas of his day and maybe change it up a little bit too? Because I think sometimes when we're getting a defiance, to me as a therapist, it's also a sign of maybe I need to change my approach. Maybe I need to, yes, we still need to answer WH questions, but can I get a book that he prefers to read?
Yeah,
can I get
different motivators?
Yeah,
right?
Because I think that comes back to, but I've had therapists and teachers say that, and I'm kind of like, well, we need to figure out something in the middle, like you said, because I don't think it's just her deciding not to work. She has to buy into it a little bit and have some interest in it and not just be one-dimensional.
I always like to look at if we can get the team to take data on preferred activity or like a preferred topic versus a non-preferred. So like you talk about WH questions, and I say, if a child really likes trains and they read a book about trains, those WH questions might be super easy. Even if it's a brand new book, might be super easy because they were engaged with that book. And then we do a book about dogs and they don't like dogs or they're scared of dogs or whatever. They're not going to answer the WH questions because they don't want to engage with that material. So at that point, then it is a behavior, right? It's like, okay, that was a choice. You know how to work on WH questions and you're choosing not to because you don't like this topic. So, we work on that aspect. So definitely need to look at preferred versus non-preferred activities. We've got a couple of other people that have commented, same here. So they're feeling that frustration of the team is saying, it's not us, it's them. It's not us, it's them. And we can't have that type of blame put on. We need to really just say, okay, maybe it's everybody who's involved. Maybe everybody's burnt out a little bit, and that's something that a teacher or a therapist on the inside can't say. Right? A teacher can't say, I am burnt out of this activity. But what I can say behind the scenes in a professional development, so when I'm coaching teachers, and I say, you know what? If you're tired of teaching something, that child's tired of learning it. Like if you're feeling burnt out on something, so are they. So you gotta switch it up. And if you gotta talk to the parents, or we talked a little bit about about kind of giving permission to do something different. If you need to talk to the parents and say, you know what, we're gonna switch some things up. Like, I think he's tired of doing this. I think he's choosing not to do it. You know what? And we've been doing it a lot. I wouldn't blame him. Let's switch some things up. That's a conversation that needs to be had. So let's go ahead and tackle kind of the last hot topic here as we wrap this up. If you guys are still have some questions, go ahead and keep putting them below the video here. If you're watching the recording of this video, however it was sent to you, over email, through Facebook, and just look at how it was sent to you, and there should be some contact information on how you can ask questions to either work with Courtney one-on-one, or to join the online help center, or if you want to become an IEP coach like Courtney, and you want to really dig deep and be able to make these changes not only for your own child, but then to help your community and start creating that ripple effect, send me a message, make a note and say, yeah, I want to be an IEP coach. So I only run that program 2, maybe 3 times a year because it's pretty intense. But I do encourage you, we need IEP coaches across the country. We need more Courtneys. We need to replicate some Courtneys across the country here. So the medical versus educational diagnosis is a huge piece. A lot of this comes up in the autism world, but it also comes up in, Down syndrome, or in our kind of multi-diagnosed kiddos that have a lot of different labels going on. And something that needs to be said is that just because a child gets a medical diagnosis doesn't mean that's going to entitle them to services, nor is it going to necessarily change their services. So, nor does the school team actually have to follow the recommendations of an outside professional. So it's really important to know that if you are seeking a label, a diagnosis, something for your child, for their well-being, for a treatment plan that you might look for, you do that for you. right? Don't do that for the school, because you're going to be disappointed when you walk in with a piece of paper and say, look, this doctor said XYZ, and the school's going to say, yeah, but we have our own rules. The school's right in saying that piece. I'm sure that, you've had several different kind of recommendations from therapists and different things for Hannah, and you've had to work on kind of bridging that gap of what does the medical community feel is best versus what does the school need to provide that's appropriate. Have you hit that roadblock before?
Yeah, definitely. And just figuring out like even home therapy and what I'm allowed to do working in the home setting versus what I was allowed to do working in the school setting, and what qualifies you for one service outside of school versus the school district and the public education qualifying for services. Totally different measurings for that. So I think figuring that out and realizing, and that's one way I've been able to figure that out as far as getting things more integrated is, okay, this is the skill I want, and how can that tie into her school day and accessing and the school's philosophy on what needs to be worked on. It has to tie into something educational. They're in school to
something further education, employment, independent living.
Yeah.
It's like,
so I've had to find a way to, this is what I want, but how does that tie into the school? And that comes back to, again, communicating with the team and saying, hey, this is what we're working on at home. Is there a way that we could work on that at school? Is there a way that ties into her academic day and the physical therapist at school working on it? And having that good communication and being able to have them also think outside the box and tie that in. Again, I haven't had that in the past, but the last 3 years, I've really honed in on being able to communicate better. And I think it's important sometimes too, like, it's not, what is it? The tone, it's the tone you use. It's how you ask, not exactly what you're asking for. And for me, that was a learning curve. I definitely early on didn't have that skill set, and developing that and really talking with the team in a way that made it productive and not a us versus them, and breaking down and having them run away from me.
You have experienced that. And it goes both ways too. In the way of, like, for a parent, by no means are we saying you have to be sugary sweet,
right,
in the way of like begging for services either, because when I'm working with clients, I usually have, there's usually a couple of different situations. Either A, there's been like this beg and plead of, could you please just do this for my child? And they're like, no, we don't have to, or sure, we'll do some of it, or that. And it isn't an us versus them. It's just that was the conversation that happened. It's a fact. That's what happened. I'll have some people say, like, collaborative advocacy, is that possible? Yes, but you have to be able to take some of the emotions out. So the fact is, the mom asked for something some way, and the school responded this way. That's a fact. That's not an us versus them kind of thing. And then I have parents that haven't really expressed their voice at all, right? So they're just kind of like, I think something's wrong, but I have no idea, or I want to ask for these things, but I don't know how to. So they've kind of been silent, just kind of going with the flow. And then we have parents that maybe have been instructed by what I call old school advocacy. It's not just old school as in this is what the school thinks versus the parent. There's some old school advocacy out there that is like, you go in and you demand and you tell them that the law says that they have to. And again, I don't want any child educated because a teacher has to do something. I want them educated in an environment that is inspiring for them. So there's like this tone. So it's really learning about where are you at in that voice, and then creating that leadership. And that's kind of where I look at our goal, right? For every one of our clients is we want them to feel that kind of leadership capability of saying, I can lead the team. I don't have to know everything, because a good leader knows they don't know everything. I don't have to know everything, and I don't have to be the expert in everything. And I can recognize other people's expertise, but I do know my child's best. I know how to lead this team to the bigger vision. And that goes all the way back to that parent input statement. I'm actually going to encourage everybody who, needs a parent input statement. and wants to do that. So there's two options. One, go find Courtney. If you want to work one-on-one with somebody to create your parent input statement, Courtney's your girl to do that. At this point, I don't have openings for one-on-one. So if you email me and ask me, I'm actually going to give you Courtney's information to create a parent input statement to learn how to have that voice. If you're not ready to work one-on-one with somebody and you're just like, I don't even know exactly what that is, I want to learn some more about what it is, that's where you message me and say, Catherine, how do I get into the online IEP Help Center? And I will teach you somewhat in this format where I'm teaching you over video, walking you through step by step. It's kind of like a DIY. I'll show you how to do it and then you have to execute it yourself. If you want that hands-on approach of working one-on-one, I'm going to point you in Courtney's direction for that. So I just want to, wrap up here and thank you, Courtney, for spending the morning but it's afternoon now for me in Chicagoland, for spending the time today and helping share, Hannah's story and your story as an IEP coach and the things that you're doing in your community. Do you have a last kind of words of wisdom of how you encourage parents to, what should their next step be? How should, what's their call to action of after this workshop? What do you really hope a parent does?
Well, I hope they get connected with one of us, because one thing that I felt so much in the beginning was a sense of loneliness, a sense of frustration, anxiety going into my IEP meetings. I would often leave in tears if I made it to the parking lot or afterwards. And there's no need to live in that frustration. And that's one of the things that drove me to be an advocate, is not only from a parent's point of view, but then working with my speech clients in the community and seeing the other frustration that other moms and dads were having, the same frustrations I had early on in Hannah's schooling, and realizing you don't want to go through all the years of school feeling that way and not getting the education that your child deserves to meet their individual needs. And so I hope they feel inspired to connect with us and stay connected, because there's so many valuable resources that we can offer them that can alleviate a lot of those feelings. I tell parents it doesn't have to be an ugly experience. We want it to be a positive experience. But what you don't know, you don't know. And when you know more, you can ask for more things and ask for it in a different way and get the end result that you were looking for. I didn't even know I could disagree with a goal in the beginning. I had no idea that I could say, I don't think that room works for her. I don't, what are my other options? I had no idea that I could do that. And so for me, figuring that out way late in her education, I was like, wow, I really wish I would have known this when she was in preschool, when she was in kindergarten. And I think that feeling of, I just don't want parents to feel like they need to go at it alone or feel all those negative feelings, because being a special needs mom or even a sibling is such a special, literally a special experience. And I never planned it. It's never something I saw coming. But now that I have it, I'm like, I'm around such amazing kids and parents who deserve the best, and I want to help them get that.
You're giving me the goosebumps there, because that's really what it is. We're a community. You're creating your community. I've created a community online, and it's not just a community of support, but it's a community of positive action and results, and growth, right? So it's a mindset, it's a growth, and it's results for our next generation. And we're not just impacting our own children, we're impacting generations to come, for sure.
Absolutely.
And, I definitely encourage everyone, again, if you are like, I just want to dig in for me, meaning, as a parent, you're just like, okay, what are my next steps? You leave a message here, you send us an email. We'll get you connected with one-on-one with Courtney or in a group setting with me. And if you're like, oh my goodness, I want to work at an entirely different level, and you want to dig in the way to help your community and to become an IEP coach, please reach out to me. Courtney will tell you we are in an IEP coach network, which is, it's growing slowly, and I'm excited about that because I really feel we have the best of the best. that are inside of the IEP Coach Network. So parents don't just call somebody out of the yellow pages, right? There's even an online yellow pages to find an advocate, that they're just like calling out of the blue, like, somebody please help me. And that's our whole mission, right? Is that parents don't have to feel like they're like searching for somebody, please help me, that we're creating this network and community where we're working together and creating these leaders in the community.
Can I say something real quick about that, Catherine? I found Catherine on Facebook from another video that my mom had just randomly liked that I saw, and I started following her, and I felt instantly comfortable with her style, and I didn't even know she was what I was looking for until I found her. But I was like, there has to be a better way of, teaching and helping other parents find the way to advocate and find their voice without the us versus them approach, or really coming out really strong and not allowing the team a chance to share their perspective. And Catherine doesn't hold back in that training and in her ongoing stuff. So I really feel like that I knew I wanted to open my doors as an advocate, but I didn't feel comfortable. And after being a part of your community and your course, it just filled in the gaps and the ongoing support of knowing that if I got stuck, I could reach out, that it wasn't just me and my client. It's actually, you get me and Catherine and the rest of the coaches. So you get more than one person.
Exactly. I don't want any, advocate, IEP, and why did I call it an IEP coach? I mean, let's just be honest. If this was an straight out advocacy webinar, you would expect a whole bunch of law jargon and this is what you do and no, this is a coaching and leadership process to change special education one child at a time, which really happens, quicker in our community when we do it that way. So I appreciate those words. Thank you so much for that. Your growth and your impact that you're having is simply amazing. Everybody, you guys know how to reach us at this point. We can't wait to work closer with you, whether you're working with us as a parent or you're becoming an IEP coach with that. But you guys have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.